up, Bulls Nation, and welcome in to the CHGO Bulls podcast presented to you by PointsBet. Don't forget that promo code CHGO when you sign up to live your bet life. I'm Peck. My guy Big David's here. My guy Will the Goat Gottlieb is in the magic Brazilian bubble. But most importantly, welcoming into the studio today, we are thrilled to have him.
Yes.
You know him for his work spanning a decade from 11 to 2020
Flex.
in ESPN in all different kinds of sports and walks of life. Made the shift to Fox Sports in 2020. Then there was another new little job he picked up in 2020. It was the television play-by-play announcer for our one and only Chicago Bulls. Yes. He is the one and only Adam Amin.
Yes.
Give it up, everybody.
Give it up.
I'm
Hello,
so
my
happy
friend.
to be here. I get to sit in between my guys today.
Yes,
yeah.
It's different than just like doing like the drive-by hug to both of you at a game and then be like, all right, I gotta go work. And
see, that's why I like seeing Adam, because when me and Adam see each other, we embrace.
It's a
I'm used to that.
legitimate it's a hug. It's a real hug. My nickname for a long time for a couple of my football crews is Huggy Bear, just because I hug everybody. And
right.
Pandemic sucked for so many reasons, but part of the reason was I just hug everybody. My family's been like that since I was a baby. I'm like that. I'm like that with all my friends, with everybody. That's how I show my appreciation and love for people. So
our powers combined.
Well, our energies are very much aligned in that sense, man.
Our powers combined. Can I say something to you too? Also, I'm glad you're here, because usually when Will's here, you know, I love to give him compliments on his perfectly coiffed hair.
It's so good.
But yours, sir. Damn.
Oh no.
This is on point.
Let me first say, I'm getting better at accepting nice things that people say. As I get older, I'm like, all right, let me not brush them aside and just be like, but I cannot take that as a compliment.
Okay.
Compared to Will, as I look into the bubble, it's still pretty glorious looking as I look at it right now.
It is glorious, man.
It's glorious.
I told you guys this before. There's like a period where it looks good after like 2 or 3 weeks after I get a haircut. And then after 3 or 4 days, it just starts to go out of control, and I'm reaching the out of control phase.
It's the haircut cycle of shame, as Boy Meets World. Do you remember Boy Meets World haircut cycle of shame?
Thank you for making that reference.
That's what he said. I get a haircut, it looks terrible for like 5 weeks, then it looks good for a day, and that's how I know it's time to get another haircut.
Have you found the podcast yet, Adam? There is a podcast hosted by Ryder Strong.
What was I listening to on the way over here?
God, this is why I love you.
I was listening to Pod Meets World on the way over. On my walk over here, I was listening to Pod Meets World.
Listening to Pod Meets World while wearing a Prince shirt. Like, he just said, you know what, Matt and Dave, I got something for all of y'all today. I'm doing all
I like to be a wide-ranging individual.
Me too, as well.
Everyone has shed their DVD collections because they're obsolete. One of the few things I still have in DVD form, seasons of Boy Meets World.
I totally respect that. One of the greatest shows of our childhood.
So good.
Shout out to Topanga.
How early of a crush was Topanga?
Oh my God.
Early. One of the. It doesn't have to be specifically. One of the earliest crushes.
Forever.
Danielle Fishel. Just a salute to an integral part of our childhood.
Absolutely, man. Shout out to Topanga, man. And Sean and his lady, man. How come that didn't work out? I'm still upset about that.
That was tough. And I miss Angela.
Yes,
when
man.
she left,
She
it
was
was hard. And he took it hard too. I used to do first off, I used to have the Sean Hunter hair, where it was split in the middle.
Okay.
Part, middle part.
So
every kid in the Gottlieb is still rolling. Gottlieb's still rolling with the Sean Hunter-esque hair, where he can, he does the thing, shakes it, and then like runs his hand through, and then like his girlfriend knows where he is at all times when he does this. It's like a radar detector.
That Pert Plus.
Got that Pantene hair going on.
You know what I'm saying? That Prel.
I was hearing all this stuff about the Better Call Saul finale last night, and I was thinking, man, I need to rewatch. I need to start this. Need to rewatch Breaking Bad. But now I'm thinking, Boy Meets World. Might have to.
I think it's a good choice.
It's BMW absolutely worth a rewatch.
And listen, don't get me wrong. I know it's a very similar, tone for both of those shows. But I think if you're only going to pick one, then go with Boy Meets World.
It's not a bad decision.
Both just so edgy.
Very edgy. Boy Meets World. Actually, all things considered.
I mean,
a couple of edgy moments.
It was edgy, though. It did.
Sean did join a cult for a while there. There were some real heavy, real-life issues that they addressed.
Yeah, he was kind of abusive and drunk. And he was very
underage drinking. They addressed that.
16. I'm like, dude,
I was like, hey, these guys got after it at that age. I definitely wasn't doing that. It was a cautionary tale.
Ended up in a hospital. How many times they end up in a hospital?
Never joined a cult because of, maybe not just specifically because of Boy Meets World and the center, but but that was a good cautionary tale.
Yeah,
good advice.
Yeah. This is what
also cautionary tale. motorcycles are dangerous. Mr. Turner
Motorcycles
gets
are
in a
scary,
motorcycle
man.
accident, almost loses his life.
Absolutely. Again, a hospital. Once again.
Yeah, once
that's
again
what
in the
it does,
hospital.
man.
Chet ends up in the hospital. He ends up in the hospital. It's all. It's
Corey and his brother would have heart-to-hearts in a hospital.
There's always a heart-to-heart in the hospital every
Always,
season.
man. That's how it goes.
We're off to a rousing start.
Yes, we are.
Dude, I mean,
That's how it goes.
I feel like
You didn't
any
realize this
crossover
was the
people
Boy
who are
Meets World
diehard
podcast.
Boy Meets
Yes,
World
yes,
slash
Will.
Bulls
Yes.
fans.
It's a very
would love this.
Will. It's a very specific Venn diagram. I think we're knocking out here.
I think Joey's over there Googling these episodes.
I've never.
what the
I
hell
don't
are they
know
talking
what this
about?
television show is.
What the hell is Boy Meets World? Dude, what is this?
Speaking of nerdy things, you and I made a discovery through a mutual friend that you were a theater nerd growing
Big
up,
time.
like I
Big
was.
time theater nerd.
I saw you in a production of Ragtime at Illinois
you did.
Theater Fest. Was that the Illinois State year or the U of I year?
It was a U of I year.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Shout out. He was amazing in it, by the way. But so, like, I've always been wondering if that was part of what led you into, or did you know simultaneously to being a theater nerd, what you really wanted to do was go into sports broadcasting?
I don't know if it was simultaneous. They both fed into each other. So I played sports like everybody else did. I played baseball. I was a very good defensive catcher from the time I could hold a glove. It was just a position that I was really good at. Could not hit very well and got worse as I got older, as a lot of us often figure out. I didn't get particularly tall. I didn't get particularly muscular or anything like that. So I was like, yeah, this isn't really working out all that well. I can still catch and I can handle the pitching staff. I cannot swing a bat. So I ended up giving up baseball. I played basketball and football. Wasn't particularly good at those after freshman year. Wasn't tall, wasn't big, wasn't strong, wasn't fast. So sure enough, I started playing high school volleyball, and I had time in the fall and the spring, and I had an orchestra teacher of mine. I had played violin from the time I was 7 years old until that point, and my orchestra teacher said, if you want, you should try choir and theater, because I think it would fit your personality. I think you might be good at it. So I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. I have all this time now because I'm not playing sports. So I joined up choir and I joined up in theater, and I wasn't bad at either one for like a high school kid. Like,
Right, yeah.
You're like, oh, he's
Although
he's
when you're
good
in a
at
high
that
school
age.
theater production, you think it's the
You think
greatest
it's the
work
biggest
that has
possible
ever
thing
existed in the history
you
of
can ever
theater.
do. So I jumped right into choir. I was in madrigals. I was in jazz choir. I was doing musical theater. I was in a production of Annie. I was in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. All these shows. I did Shakespeare, and then I started studying opera. And I thought I was gonna. I told this story during the Sox broadcast the other day with Stoney. I was training to be an opera singer for like a year. Wow. And then my voice, which used to be at a tenor level like Pavarotti, went down to a baritone, and it went down to a bass after that. Wow. And it was sounding not like I sound now, but it sounded a little bit like this.
Right.
And I was like, well, I can't hit the high notes anymore. I can still sing. I can be a bass in the choir, and I can project my voice and still try theater. So I kept with it. I ended up in an all-state production of Ragtime that Matt saw at the Cranert Center at University of Illinois, and
Truly moving stuff.
had a blast. And I'm still friends with one of the guys in the show is my broker.
Really?
I'm still friends with the stage manager from that show. One of my buddies is a doctor in Chicago. It's incredible. I made lifelong friends from that, and it gave me a lot of the skills that translated into college. When I ended up going to Valpo, I tried theater and I tried TV and radio. And TV and radio, specifically doing sports broadcasts at Valpo, was the thing that scratched the itch of all of that. It was the combination of sports and performance. You're essentially doing a theatrical performance. You know,
Right.
the phrase about radio has always been theater of the mind, right? You're trying to create a picture in people's heads. So those elements all combined in a sports broadcast to me. And that was probably the appeal to it. So while it wasn't simultaneous, I feel like it all connected and fed into this one thing that I ended up doing.
Very cool.
That's so cool because, again, this is why Matt and I are so tight, because that was literally my first question as well. Was asked about your theater back. That's why I wore my Judy Garland for you
Oh
too
my
today,
gosh,
bro.
the man that
Put
got
this
away.
one on
You
for
are to me
today,
the man
sir.
that got away.
Yeah,
I hope
yeah.
you know that, buddy. I hope you'll always be the man that got away.
Hey
from
man,
me.
I'm still around, bro. Just give me a holler.
I'm
Just
clinging
give me a
on to him
holler.
for dear life,
You know
Adam.
what I'm saying? Right. I saw Matt's face change when he said that. Like, what? I know we cool, Adam. Come on now. I know we cool.
I don't mean to leave you out of that.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
it's
sorry.
fine, it's fine.
But no, but the man is representing
He's
Judy.
been thinking about
gotta,
deserting me
But I
for
had to. But
years.
the thing I wanted to know, because I asked Matt this, and he told me told me his struggles with this as well. How tough was it for you to being in theater and finding people who actually love sports like you do and having those conversations?
the couple people that I mentioned earlier that I'm still friends with, part of the reason is because we were able to bond over our love of baseball and the Bulls. My doctor buddy was a big Bulls fan. My broker was a big St. Louis Cardinal fan, so we always had debates about Chicago and St. Louis. But I love the Venn diagram. Like I know I've used that a couple of times, but like I really like that crossover, and I like that wide ranging appreciation for different things. And I think you can find elements of all this stuff. Like I said, I found elements of sports in broadcasting and in theater and all of these, walks of life. You can find some connectivity to it, and if it all combines into things that you enjoy, it's what you guys are doing right now. It's a little bit of theater, like when you're able to emote. It does, being a performer doesn't mean you're being fake. It just means you're adding emphasis to the emotions that you're already feeling.
Right.
Like my excitability comes out in a big moment on a sports broadcast, but that's still theatrical, because in a normal setting, I may not get up and down and scream, or I may not get up and down and raise my voice. My emotions may manifest themselves differently, but as a broadcaster, part of your job is to kind of elevate the emotions of what a fan is feeling or what you're interpreting, and express it in a way that affects people emotionally. And I think all of these walks of life, all of these little areas have some kind of connectivity to one another if you seek them out.
Right.
And it was kind of a cool confluence of events that led me to kind of discovering this. I enjoy this. I'm not terrible at it. It was the same deal. I was okay at this for a college kid, and that's the only reason I felt comfortable sticking with it.
That's interesting you say. I know Will has a question. Let me ask you this quick, because that's interesting you say that. Like, you get that same thing you wanted to get out of theater as well. Because my father was also a theater guy, and he said the one thing he liked about it so much, in his words, he was like, when it would go VIP, it would go VOP. So basically, once it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you have one time to do this thing.
Yeah.
Is that the same kind of thing for you? Like, it's that live aspect of it that just drives that adrenaline also?
100%. And listen, we tape open sometimes, like, for any broadcast. It could be for Fox, it could be for the Bulls, for the Sox, for the Bears, whatever. We often just tape the open because it's it's 2 to 3 minutes, right, of the broadcast, but it's the part that, like, you really work the most at as a production crew oftentimes, and you put a lot of work into it, and it's not necessarily like the most enjoyable part. It's fun to come on air and kind of set the tone and set the energy for the broadcast, but that's the only part that, like, is taped. And I think that's part of the reason I don't love it as much, or it doesn't appeal to the whole crew. Like, I think, like, the part that Mark Brady, our Bulls producer, loves is the game. The part that I love, the part that Stacy loves, the part that Casey loves is the game, because everything is based off of it. Everything you do in a pregame, everything you do in a postgame, everything you do in the open is all revolving around the action that takes place for those 4 quarters, those 3 periods, those 9 innings, whatever. And that's the driving force of why any of us do anything in this business, is the games themselves. And because it's live and we're covering it in real time, and the appeal to being there on the scene calling games, for me, has always been, you're the first person, you're the first liaison from a crowd, from an audience sitting at home or listening in their cars or whatever, to the game itself. I started in radio, and I think the people that start in this business in radio, I'm not saying they're better or worse, but it's a very specific mentality they have about being the first to report that one thing and to create that picture, especially on radio, is to, you don't know unless Chuck says it on the radio, right? If you're listening in the car and you're listening to Chuck and Bill, you don't know what's happening unless they say it. And in your mind, it doesn't exist until they say it. And it's a little bit of, obviously, of a different job in television, so it's more of a caption, it's more of a supplement, a compliment. That's why the emotion of it has to be an important element. That's why you have to perform a little bit. You have to you can't beat the pictures. Yeah. So your sound, the audio that you're supplying to supplement the broadcast, has to be emotionally connected to it. So I think, though, all these, I know I'm kind of giving you a lot of inside baseball here, but I think all of this stuff adds to the appeal of the games themselves, and why I don't enjoy doing the anchoring as much. I did anchoring and I did shows, sparingly at ESPN. I've done some stuff here and there. I've done some radio here in town. It's just not the same for me, and it's not the thing that I love the most. I enjoy it, it's fun, but for me, the games themselves and all these elements that we just talked about are what are appealing to me about it.
Go ahead, Will.
It's crazy to me that you say you kind of like stumbled into this almost, because you are so good at it, and it's been such a just like treat to listen to you call games. And that's part of the reason why it's I don't want to say it sucks to go watch the Bulls games in person, but I can't listen to you guys when I'm sitting there. So I'm curious though, like, if it is something that you just kind of stumbled into, like at what point did you realize like, hey, I can be really good at this. I can do this professionally and at like the highest level. And then also, I mean, you call baseball, football, basketball, is there like a sport or a team that you love calling the most?
I'll do the second one first. I don't. The excuse I've always used, because it is kind of a cop-out answer, and I understand that because it's not the definitive answer that I think people want when they ask that question. The next thing is always the biggest thing. Like the next thing always seems to be the most important thing. The next thing seems to be the thing that excites me the most because it has to be.
Yeah.
You know, Kevin Harlan talks about this a lot because he does Monday Night Football on the radio. He does a Sunday NFL game on CBS. He does TNT NBA basketball. He does the NCAA tournament. He does regular season games for college basketball. So he's got a hefty schedule for like 8 months out of the year. And he always said that the next thing was the most important. Like do as much preparation as you can, as much advanced prep as you possibly can. But when you start like getting into the town of the next game and you're traveling and you're in that city, like you need to lock in on that thing. And it's not that I love one more than I love another. It's the fact that the next thing is the one that's going to give me the next jolt. You know, it is. I know I'm talking about it like a drug addict in some ways. Like there is an addiction to this in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I know it's a strange way to frame it, but there is an addiction to
this yesterday about us being junkies.
The adrenaline of it though, like to be able to put yourself, like kind of throw yourself emotionally into whatever it is in front of you and to have to encompass it, you know, with everything you got for that night. It's why the focus for the next thing has to be so high, and it's why it's so enjoyable. So in terms of like what sport I love the most, like when Major League Baseball playoffs roll around, like I did that Sox series last year, that there's nothing bigger than that to me at that moment. And then the next week you go back to an NFL game and there's nothing bigger than that at that moment. And then there's the opening night for the Bulls and there's nothing bigger than that at that moment. But if I really parse it, it's a playoff. Like I've done game 7s of conference final series. I've done, you know, playoff series for Major League Baseball. I've done big NFL games. I've done college football championships. It's whatever the biggest stakes have. That's typically the one that the games that I gravitate towards the most. And then for your first one, Will, I think when I got like into my junior or senior year of college, and it took a long time to kind of feel comfortable with what I sounded like, doing enough games to where I felt like I knew the structure of it. Like, Will, I'll say it this way. I've got friends of mine that do this job that you watch them and you're like, you just seem naturally perfect for this job. Like Joe Davis is the voice of the Dodgers, and he's one of my best friends. We grew up in the business together. We've known each other since we were in our early 20s doing minor league baseball together. And I listen to him and I'm like, dude, screw you. Like, you just sound good. Like, how did you sound?
How do you sound that good?
Wayne Randazzo's, you guys, a lot of you might know Wayne's name. He's another super, super close friend of mine, and he's so good. But I remember listening to him like the first time 10 years ago, and I'm like, how are you this good at this at this point of your career? Like, I'm not this good at this, and I've done a lot. I'm a reps guy. Like, I have to do it over and over again. And in my estimation, I'm not speaking for them. In my estimation, I think guys like Joe and Wayne are like just naturally gifted at this, and they got the reps, which only made them that much better. I think Jason Benetti and I have had conversations about this where I think he and I are both reps guys. We just do it as often as we can so that it's all muscle memory and it's solidified. So I think part of the reason I felt comfortable by junior and senior year is because at Valpo, it's not Syracuse, right? Syracuse, for those of you who don't know, is this revered broadcasting school, right? Iron Eagle, Bob Costas, Mike Tirico, Dave Pash. I mean, go through a list. Dick Stockton. There's dozens of people who you've listened to and watched on TV or on radio that are from Syracuse, that went to Syracuse. And Valpo was just, hey, here's the radio station. Try not to swear. Good luck, and it's not a ton of oversight, so we just got to do it.
You hear the Gary Railcats,
I did the Railcats.
Dude,
like, that's like,
I drive past the Steel Yard all the time, man.
Like, I did the Railcats. I did the Joliet Jackhammers. I did the Schaumburg Boomers as a fill-in guy. All that, I needed to do it. Every time somebody said, do you want to do this? I'd go, yes, because I don't know when I'll get another chance to get better at it. So I had to do it. So that's probably when, Will. It was like 21, 22 years old, and I was like, okay, maybe I have a career at this. Maybe I've got a shot at doing this for a career.
10,000 hours.
10,000 hours. It's very much a Malcolm Gladwell thing for me, and I'm not saying it's that for everybody, but for me it had to be.
We will get some of your thoughts on the Bulls because this is a Bulls show. But I do have one more broadcasting question that I've been meaning to ask you for a while now, and it's probably something that you do for whatever team, whatever sport you're calling. But I've really noticed it with your work with the Bulls over the past couple of years. And it's this way that you will take something that myself or Dave or Will or anybody else that is a junkie Bulls nerd who is on Bulls Twitter all day, every day, will find in some weird fringe of Bulls Twitter, and you will bring it and add it into your broadcast in some certain moment during a timeout, as an anecdote, if it's a stat, if it's a, whatever it is. And I love it because it is a very new thing to me in the world of just mainstream. Here's a play-by-play person, here's a color commentary person, and as a play-by-play person, you're bringing in fringe bits and pieces of sports Twitter and Bulls Twitter, NBA Twitter, that a lot of more traditional and more senior play-by-play broadcasters probably wouldn't think to do. Do you do that consciously, or is it just you're like, hey, I saw this cool thing on Twitter today, and I'm going to talk about it while we're broadcasting the game tonight? Because I love that you've added that into your broadcast.
It's way more the latter, and I think it's because I'm 35. I jumped on Twitter during like my senior year of college. Like I've been, and we were on Facebook, in high school or like freshman year of college, basically for me. And it's like, I'm one of the first people, and pretty much any broadcaster at this point that's around my age or younger, and probably 35, 36, 37 is the cutoff of that. Maybe Benetti fills into that role as well, that basically started their career while on Twitter. Like I know it's a very odd thing to think about, but I think honestly that's what it is. Where most of my adult life I've had social media, and we're the first generation. Joe, Wayne, myself, Benetti, Ryan Rucco, like a lot of us are the first generation to do it at this level, to have like an NBA job full time, or to do a national broadcast week to week for one or two sports or whatever it is. Like we're the first generation to get a chance to do it. So the people that are our age and that are in our generation this is how we absorb information. Like Twitter to me, and I mean, we've talked about this offline, I've kind of gotten away from Twitter in terms of interacting with fans, and it's purposeful on my part just for my own sake. But I'm still on it because it's the greatest information curation tool in the history of our planet. Like anything you want, you get to formulate it exactly how you want it. And for me, following you guys, following like the people I think are funny that talk about the Bulls, even if I know like this is clearly like a funny thing, or it's overly emotional, or it's not like in the realm of logic and reason that I'm trying to operate in terms of real, true to life preparation, it at least gives me the emotional side of it. And I know how at least people are feeling. And that does matter, especially on the local side. Maybe not as much on the national, and if you can tune into it a little bit, you're great. But I think it's more important on the local side when I'm already immersed in this team, but I also want to know what the reach is.
It
and
connects you more so to the local fan base you're calling on a nightly basis, and especially the younger segments of that local fan base that use Twitter and social media like to follow their team religiously on an hour-to-hour basis. Yeah,
so it's a lot of, I think, our generation that has transitioned into using that as a tool. Like I said, I don't interact with it anymore, but to me, it is such a good tool for this job specifically to be impossible.
I mean, when you were talking about Stefano, our pal, shout out to him, and the dancing cat videos, like on the broadcast, that was just such a beautiful moment for me. I'm like, I love that Adam is taking time to address this during the middle of a broadcast. It was great.
I see all your tweets. I know what all you say.
It literally does. Yeah. It tripped me out when you said my name. Like I didn't even realize
listen, we tossed out the Levine stat because it was I was the first person that pointed that out to me, or that I saw it pointed out was from you, and I'm like, yeah, that's true. He hasn't done it since UCLA.
Yeah, my phone rang immediately. I didn't even see it, and people were like, dude, did you see that? I'm like,
good. I'm glad. That makes me happy.
Yeah, it's cool, man.
All right, plenty more to get to with our guy Adam Amin here on CHGO Bulls today. But first, today's episode, as I mentioned by the top of the show, brought to you by our wonderful friends at PointsBet. I'm even wearing their shirt today.
Yes, he is.
I'm a company man. PointsBet Sportsbook is counting down the days.
What a sellout he is.
Hey, man.
Keeping it real.
Hey, we're trying to keep the lights on, all right?
Cashing them checks, Adam. Cashing them checks. Counting down the days until football season with a new offer every day until the season kicks off from now until September 8th. We're getting close. PointsBet Power Hour will unlock a new daily offer from noon to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time every day. Sign up for PointsBet now using that promo code CHGO to also get those risk-free bets up to $2,000. Don't miss out on your chance to get daily access to free bets, boosted odds, so much more now through September 8th. Plus, with that $50 more first-time deposit, you'll get a free membership to CHGO, which unlocks all of our great content by all of our credentialed writers and reporters, like our man Will to Go Gottlieb.
Brazil.
Plus, a shirt of your choice from our CHGO merch locker. So download that PointsBet app today and use code CHGO to take advantage of this limited time offer. So once the game starts, Will, don't just bet. Tell Bulls Nation what to do.
You live your bet life.
That's what you do. Do you live your bet life when you're broad? Like, do you ever put? I don't know if you're a big sports gambling guy, especially once it's become like just all out legal in Illinois, a lot of other states. Were you before, and now that it's big, are you doing it? And do you let yourself do it on games that you're calling?
I've never gambled on a sporting event in my life.
It's probably a good thing.
It's honestly, I've never done it before, and it's not out of some moral obligation against it. It's not that. It's just I've seen too much, and I don't think I would be very good at it.
I've seen enough to know that I've seen too much.
I've seen enough to know that I've seen enough, and I can't do it. I do. Especially for football, I always write down the spread of a game, always, and the total, because if you get the blowout game that doesn't really matter anymore, and we've had plenty of those in my 2 years so far, and going into year 3, 2 years of doing the NFL on TV, I would do it for college football too at ESPN, because that's if you're tuning in. We used to do the Pac-12 Friday night game, at 10:30 Eastern, be on at 9:30 here in Chicago. And the only people other than the West Coast fans that are watching it, if you're up at 1 o'clock in the morning watching that game, it's because you're gambling on the game.
Exactly.
All right?
It's because you're a degenerate gambler.
It's totally fine. So if we get the blowout game, I want to make sure that I let you know, in the tradition of an Al Michaels, this game has hit a significant mark of some sort. And you can be cheeky about it, and leagues still don't want us on the game broadcast itself to reference a lot of that stuff, if at all possible. But I think it's good to just kind of as a wink and a nod to the people that are probably watching your game, and if it's a 21-point game with 2 minutes to go in the fourth and the Giants have the ball down 28-7 and the total is 39, that last touchdown that Daniel Jones is going to run in with no time on the clock has some impact on some
I mean, Big Dave witnessed it firsthand last season when I was throwing some money on some Bulls games, and it was either a Bulls blowout win or a Bulls blowout loss. And I was just worried about the spread in the final 6 minutes of a completely decided game.
He is still mad at Malcolm Hill.
Oh my God!
One of the worst beats. One of the worst beats of the year.
You know what we're talking about when we say
till this
when
day.
Malcolm Hill went off in a game that was over. Oh, yep. Still
cut
mad
the
about
lead
that.
down to single digits. The Hawks were in control, and here we go. Let's make a late push. Man. I've had. If I want to make sure I have this. I think it was Temple and East Carolina at ECU in 2019 was one of the worst beats I've ever been a part of, where there was a pick at the end of the game or a fumble at the end of the game, like a strip after a tackle, and he took it in for a pick six, which would have flipped the total, and they called it back because the whistle had blown, the ball hadn't come loose yet, the whistle had blown dead officially to end the game, which flipped it back to the under. So we've had, anytime you made SVP, because we would do segment. We do the Thursday night college football game twice or so. We had the bad beat, and we led the bad beat segment in SVP. It's well, you probably just saw this about 45 minutes ago, and they'd use our call, and it always cracked us up. So another reason that we tried to just be conscientious of it. That was a game that was already over, but me, Pat McAfee, Matt Hasselbeck in the booth all knew the total, all knew the over-under. We're that's a key, and we always have a good time with it.
One thing I think that's so great about you is you do so many games. You do tons and tons of games in different sports, different genres of them. But one thing is great is every time I hear you doing a different one, it never sounds like you've got one foot out the door. You always sound like you're in it. You know what I mean? You're focused strictly on that game. It's not like I can hear an announcer who's used to doing football, doing basketball, and it just sounds like he's just there filling in, and can't wait to get back to football. You always sound like you're immersed in it, and you know so many different details of it. And it's such a skill. Kevin Harlan is another guy who I know like that. When he does college, I believe that, he's in there. What does that come from? Is that just a deep, deep love of actual sports that you have, or is it more of a people thing also with you?
I think it's a lot of it. I think it's different elements to it, and I'll say again, that's like one of the highest pieces of compliment you can give to a broadcaster is that it sounds like it's their show, like they've been there the whole year. I said this again, I'm just thinking about this now because I was on with Stoney on Sunday filling in for Jay, and they asked that question or a similar question, and I said the biggest thing is I want to show up for that one national, even if it's a national game, I want to show up and make it seem like, I've been your local guy all year. Yeah. Now, again, I'm never, ever, 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 ever going to know more about that team than their local broadcaster, the same way no other play-by-play announcer is going to know as much about the Bulls as I do. Or at least that's the goal.
Yeah,
because I'm the one who's doing the 90% of the games. Mm-hmm. But it's the same thing Jason does when he fills in. I try to do that for him when I fill in. I try to be that when I do a baseball game on Fox or a football game on Fox. The goal is based on I like to study. It's tedious for sure at times, but I still enjoy the preparation process. I love when it pays off in a broadcast at the right time in the right moment. That's a great feeling, so you're chasing that feeling, so you keep doing it over and over, keep deep diving and keep reading and looking for that extra note. I think part of it too is as I get older and I get more experienced, the other part of that is to not overload people, because the more information you throw out there, it can become white noise at times. Mm-hmm. It can just become all blurred in together. So you want to choose the right timing. The timing of the preparation is almost as, if not more important than the note or the detail itself. Right. And we try very hard to talk to other broadcasters, read every beat writer, read all the stories that come out, whether it's a national perspective or a local perspective, in the days leading up to that game. And, for the Bulls, obviously it's a little bit easier because I don't have to do the baseline stuff. It's our team, so it's it's the team I cover. But every day it's, what did Casey write today? What did Joe write today? What did Jamal write this week for .com? What did Darnell write this week? What did Will write this week? What did Cody write this week? What's Rob thinking about? I want to make sure that I go through everybody's stuff and make sure I read it. Hey, Julia's on the beat this week. I got to make sure I read her this week. You have to be on top of that. No more than 10% of that may ever get used on the air. Right. You just don't know which 10% it might be. You don't know what type of game you're going to have tonight. And heck, you don't know what type of game you're going to have next Thursday. True. When it's a blowout against Sacramento. Right. And now you actually need to go back a week to some of the stuff that you want to refer back to. So it's a love for it. It's a respect for the audience. And it's all part of a very specific process that gets cultivated over a long period of time to make you feel like that I'm as immersed as I can be. And it doesn't always happen. Not every fan's going to feel that way. Sure. But the goal is to make as many people feel like, all right, he at least has worked to know the stuff that I know. That's the hope.
Excellent, man. Well,
all right, Will, first actual Bulls basketball question goes to you.
Well, I'm curious, just from an overarching perspective, you kind of talked about the theater of it. But how much different was it? How much more enjoyable was it for you calling games this past year compared to the others? Or I guess it was just the year before with the Bulls. But just what was that like? That kind of turnaround, and especially being next to Stacey King, who's obviously just so good at being positive and energized about the team. What did you feel from him in terms of a difference this past year compared to the one before?
Well, I hope at least that we're critical, but we're fair and critical when we are critical of the team. And I do think that Stacey and I take a lot of pride in criticizing bad play. We never make it personal. It's not about being personal with people. If they get paid a lot of money, they're professional athletes, they know it's part of the territory, and because they're pros and because they're talented, they set a certain standard for themselves. So if they don't reach that standard, we have a tendency to call that out. And I think you're more critical of a good team than you are of a bad team. It's easy to criticize a bad team, but you're more critical of a good team because they set a certain standard that's expected of them. You start winning games, we're going to dive into the pick and roll a little bit more and be like, well, this play, it didn't work out. And it sounds like we're nagging on the team. That's not the case. The expectations are higher. So I think with the expectations raising, the expectations got raised before the 21-22 season. In general, I thought they were raised because the talent that was added.
Yeah,
right.
You add Lonzo, DeMar, Caruso.
The assumption is
right
by sheer talent alone, this should be a team that's 10 games better than they were the season prior, and they kind of ended up right around that point if you extrapolate, a 72 game season to an 82 game season. That first year obviously was the COVID year. It was obviously strange being in the building. Nobody else is really in the building. Being in a studio, a little room together, Stacey and I, during the road games that year, and obviously we had to do that a little bit this year too at times for COVID issues. But like the difference was it couldn't have been more different because of all that, because the energy was different in the building. Like I remember when we first had fans at the end of the COVID season and like the Boston game for the first time, there were people trickling in. I'm like, oh, this is already, you feel a little bit different. You already feel a little bit more of the energy and the life in that building. And then as the season started and they played well, they were 6-1 out of the gate. Even the preseason games, there was a different life in the building because of the style of play. So I think the expectations, as soon as those expectations got raised, you're more critical of a team when they're good because you expect more of them and they expect more of themselves. And you as fans expect more of a good team than you do of a mediocre team. When the team's bad, you just go, hey, this is truly what it is right now. You try not to fight it. But when the bar is raised to think this is the number one seed at the All-Star break, we have expectations now for the final 2 months of the season. So when they don't live up to that, or when you feel like that they could do better, they could do more because you've seen it happen, you're almost more critical of them at that point. So that was kind of the vibe that played along. The good trade-off of that is they're a better team, which means there's more fun moments, there's more energy, there's more highlights, there's more reasons to be excited and happy and joke around and all of that stuff. It's a great trade-off, obviously. You'd much rather have a good team that you can be critical of that gives you these great, full of life and full of energy moments over the year than the alternative.
Shout out to our guy Daddy Fish in the comments, who said he thought Adam and Stacey brought great energy when the building was empty, and that's impressive. It's probably way easier to do when you got a full rockin' madhouse, which it was nice to see again, especially after the empty COVID year, but then even the years preceding that. Just a bad Bulls team, you were starting to see the United Center get emptier and emptier than any of us had ever seen in our lifetime.
First time in like a decade they weren't number one in attendance.
Exactly.
Philadelphia overtook them, and I was like, oh, wow.
So to see, and Dave and I went to a lot of games this year in the stands, which is great, and being a part of that madhouse crowd again was great.
It was.
Was there something for you that was the biggest pleasant surprise as you were calling the whole season, whether it was the dominance of DeMar DeRozan as he's aging into his his 30s years, the way that Io answered the bell when he was called upon to play such a much bigger role than I think a lot of people, maybe even himself, anticipated. What was that biggest pleasant surprise for you over the course of the whole season?
Well,
thanks, Joey.
Tossing the hat back. DeMar is number one, is A1 on that list, not because you didn't expect him to play well. The level at which he played, the efficiency with which he played, especially in that stretch right around the All-Star break going into and after it, but especially going into that All-Star break, that's special. Like that is atypical of any NBA player to have that level of sustained success for that long of a period of time. That just doesn't get seen very often, unless you're talking about the Currys of the world, the LeBrons of the league right now. Those are the types of players that we typically think of. We're talking about Hall of Fame caliber, maybe Mount Rushmore type of active players that we're discussing that have that ability, the Durants of the world. And DeRozan was playing at that level. That's why you were in the MVP conversation if you're DeMar DeRozan, because you played at such a high, sustained level of excellence. So that's line item number one. I was impressed with Zach playing through.
Yeah.
Especially in a contract. I understood it was a contract year, so maybe there was an extra little bit of motivation there, but he never complained. He wanted to be in the lineup every day. You could tell it bothered him at times. You could tell he was not 100%. And yet at the same time, I just appreciated that he went through it because he felt a certain level of responsibility. And I hope that Zach is the type of guy, and I've never seen anything otherwise. I think Zach is the type of guy that takes responsibility and shoulders it. So even with the big contract, I think he feels some level of responsibility with the money, not just I got paid. I got the bag. I'm good.
And before DeMar arrived, and I think even still, he has been the face of the franchise for a while here.
Still.
Of the pieces in that Jimmy trade, he's the one that stuck around, put the work into his game, and turned himself into a star.
And as much as I love DeMar, and I still think he might be one of the great players in Bulls history to pass through, even if he's not a homegrown talent, Zach LaVine is still the face of this franchise. Right. He's the one that people know the most, whether it's because he's younger, whether he's more explosive, the marketing of it, it doesn't matter. He still, to me, is the face of this franchise, especially after signing the Supermax. I didn't realize how great Caruso was. I did not realize how good Alex Caruso was as a defender and more as a playmaker. I didn't realize that that's where his offensive talent sat. And obviously LeBron had spoken very highly about him and said, he's one of the great teammates. He's one of the best LeBron whisperers, maybe, of LeBron's career. Just somebody who understood how to play with LeBron, how he serves the role of playing under LeBron James.
Vital piece of that bubble Lakers team.
Absolutely. And that's what I knew about him. I was like, I know he's a good defender and I know he was a key piece, but to watch it in action, to see the little nuanced plays that he makes, not just as a great defender who, I loved hearing him talk about how it's like being a snake defensively. Like, you have to be ready to strike and counteract what the initial action is. It's so incredible to listen to him. But I honestly feel like you don't appreciate it until you see it in person. That play he made against the Knicks, like that little... it was off an offensive rebound. He's at the top. He's looking to the near sideline. Vucevic is at midcourt, and he sprints behind him. And Alex just knew that he was there. And he just left it for him. And I'm like, that's a heady. I see 2 or 3 steps ahead of everybody else. And I didn't realize how good Lonzo was in that same vein. They're both very much cut from the same cloth, where they just see like 1 or 2. At their best, maybe 2 or 3 steps ahead of what the other guys are seeing. I think it's in that order to me, and then I think Ayo is number 5 right on that list too, just to step up the way he played when they needed him most. I was impressed by that.
True indeed. Another thing I see, I'm heaping all this praise on you, deservedly so, though. Deservedly so. But another thing,
I'm trying to get better at accepting and appreciating compliments rather than being
Illinois Sportscaster of the Year 2021. By the way, people,
if you're gonna hang with me, Adam, you're gonna have to know praise will be heaped.
Had to do it to you.
You know what I mean? A workman is worth his hire, man. I'm gonna hand it to you. But one thing I do like is you have what I like to call controlled fandom. And when you're watching a game and there are moments where, whether they're high or whether they're low, like you can kind of hear your fandom kind of seep out a little bit, but you always know, you know what I'm saying, where you are, what you're doing. It never gets ahead of you. And I'm saying all that to say, I'm on my podcast right now. We're doing our tournament of trash, and this year it's worst Bulls moments. So I've gone over quite a few Bulls moments, and one I went over and I marveled at was the Denzel Valentine against the Miami Heat, where he took that 40-footer. Because it was that moment for me. It was great just to kind of hear it seep a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like he was doing the call. He was right with it. It was like, no, wait, what? And you could just hear the fan, like you wanted to be having a beer in your hand right then at that moment, making that call.
I think I was drunk after that shot went up. I think
Michael in the comments knows what we're talking about.
More
in the comments saying, "Oh my goodness, Valentine!"
And just hearing you say that is not the shot you want to take. Like,
they had worked so hard to get back into that game. I've thought about that moment in like the year since or whatever it's been. I was like, did we go too far? Because somebody, I remember that got on like PTI and like around the horn.
Oh, it went viral.
Like Bomani was talking about it. I was like, did we go too hard on Denzel?
I don't think so.
And I was like, listen, I go back to what we said before. It's nothing. We never make it personal.
Correct.
We never said Denzel's a bad human being for taking
That's
the shot.
That's what they always gave us when we were doing Outsiders.
We never said make it personal.
We never said just don't make it personal.
We never said he's the worst player around. I said that. I said that about Grayson Allen. I'm like, after the Caruso incident, I was like, I'm not saying Grayson Allen is the worst guy on the planet. I'm saying in these circumstances, this takes place too often for my liking.
Right.
In that moment, that's not the shot that should have been taken. And you know who knew that more than anybody else was Denzel Valentine.
No, Denzel thought that was the best shot to take on that possession.
The way he reacted, he said the confident thing afterwards. He said the confident thing afterwards, which is like, hey, that shot I felt like I could make. That's how you have to think that way if you're an NBA player. You can't.
Yes.
DeMar DeRozan believes that. Like, he believes that every shot's going to go in. It's a mentality that I can respect and appreciate. Correct. But again, that's not your shot.
Right,
if you had made 3 30-footers in that game, I go, listen, man, you tip of the cap to you.
Right.
We're using a lot of context, and that when you said controlled fandom, the word that I love in this job more than anything is context. I can give you a nugget, I can give you a stat, I can give you, a number, but unless I give you some context surrounding it, or if you've already gained the context by watching the game and you've been in with us the whole night, that number or that note doesn't make sense. And I think in that context of the situation of how they had worked to get back into the game, I think he understood that in the postscript that wasn't the best shot. We reacted to it as we kind of knew it wasn't the best shot. And we try in everything we do to use context, not just in what we say, but how we say it. Like context does impact your emotions as well. And I try to be as reasoned as I can be in the moments that are the hottest of temperatures. Like when the moment is at its hottest, whether you're frustrated, whether they're playing poorly, if something really good is happening, you try to corral it. You want the biggest call to be the biggest moment of the game. That's why the buzzer beaters are fun. Like that's why the Indiana buzzer beater for me, it's why it was fun, because that's the moment you get to let loose, and that is the moment. There is no moment that's going to be bigger than that, and that's how we want to use context to fuel the emotion with which we speak.
I want to follow up on that DeMar DeRozan delivers, because Matt, wow, what a shot, what a call. We will do that coming up next to get more of Adam's thoughts on the Bulls offseason and the upcoming season in just a minute. But first, Big Dave, tell our listeners and Bulls Nation everywhere out there about the wonderful products available at Owen.
I shall do that. And Adam would like this too, because that man is in shape over here. That 100% plant-based
I think he jogged here, by the way.
20-minute walk. He said it was a 20-minute walk. Well, when he's on that 20-minute walk, he can have that 100% plant-based protein shake that gives you nutrition that works as hard as he does. All right, all of these products are free of artificial ingredients, allergen-friendly, no gluten or dairy, and it is good to your tummy tum-tum. It is easily digestible. I'm talking about Owen. It is only what you need. And, of course, it's endorsed by QB1, Justin Fields, who we was watching because we were listening to this man call the game. Listening to him, shout out Jim Miller. Listening to him call that game out there. But Justin Fields is also down with Owen, so you should be down with it too. So Owen and CHGO have partnered up to give you this awesome offer. You can get 20% off your first purchase at liveowen.com. That's 20% off your first purchase at liveowen.com. Just use that code CHGO20. So join Justin Fields, join myself, join the GOAT, join Joey, join Matt, who's got his hat back on his rack, because that's where he's at. I'm going to keep rhyming. Attack.
That was very nicely done. Very nicely done.
All that. So get that down with him, man, and join Owen, because it is only what you need. Because as I keep telling y'all, a win's a win. That was for you, Adam.
That was very nicely done. That was pun heavy, and I liked it.
Getting the full effect. The Big Dave ad reads up close and personal, man.
He's showing off today.
He's definitely showing off.
I went behind the back on him a little bit, Will. I went behind the
Adam
back.
gets to sit next to Stacey King do his.
I was gonna say it's
you gotta step your game up, Big Dave.
Hey, man. When Stacey was here, I had to step it up.
Yeah, step it up. I can respect it. I can respect it for Stacey.
You know, when you're around the greatness.
DeMar DeRozan, New Year's Eve. Buzzer beater, wins the game over the Pacers. Two-part question. Where does that rank, if you have rankings, and all the calls you've made in your career spanning all the different sports, both professional and collegiate? Because you've had some epic ones, like Women's Final Four from a few years ago, I remember as being a great one. The shot from Agumbawale, I think. Where does it rank? And how mad are you that you weren't on the call the next night for his back-to-back second night in a row buzzer beater against Washington?
I am happy for my good buddy Andy Dimitra, who did a fantastic job on that broadcast. He did a great job on that call. He nailed it too, and I was so happy for him that he got a chance to do that. Obviously, he loves the Bulls.
We will let ourselves out.
I heard it. I was sitting. I was in Baltimore, which is why I couldn't do the game. I had to do an NFL game on Sunday. And I would have loved to make it work. Baltimore's not that far from Washington, so like it would have been awesome to make that work. I just couldn't make it work. But I was sitting in my hotel room and I'm like just tracking the game on my phone, and I'm doing my notes for the football game, and I get my phone starts blowing up because some people think that they're assuming
that
I was on the call
right.
for it,
yeah.
And other people knew that I'm not, and go, did you see it? Did you see it? So I go on Twitter immediately and I listen to it. It was awesome, but like I was upset in the sense of like that would have been fun to be a part of. That would have been cool.
It was history. It was NBA history.
It was incredible.
I think it was going around Twitter that day that it was only the second time ever, other than Larry Bird, that a player in the NBA history had done that in consecutive games. It's
the first time on back-to-back days Bird had done it in consecutive games. But so yeah, like you're upset in the sense of like I was upset the same way. Like Ian Eagle, who's one of my mentors in this business, should have called the Kawhi Leonard game winner in Game 7, the bouncer.
Right.
But he was at his son Noah's college graduation that day, and Kevin Harlan did a fantastic job on the call. Yeah. And I remember texting Ian, and I was like, "How are you feeling right now?" He goes, "Would have been nice to have, but at least but Noah walked across the stage, and I can live with that." So it's like
moment for a parent.
It's like you know what? That's the right perspective to have. It's. I don't know what the order of it is. It's a top 10 for me moment. Calls are subjective. Like the fan gets to decide if it's good or bad or whatever, and fans will feel differently on the same call. That's good. Okay. Thank you. But like for me, I just know that what I felt in that moment and how like not just the call itself, but like the euphoria you kind of feel after you get off the air of moments like that, because you're tense. My shoulders are never more tense than in the final seconds. And I'm sure you got. I mean, it's the same way you are watching a game. You're white knuckling it. Completely.
I have a problem.
It's a human way to react to it, and I'm the same way. Again, I have to be controlled in certain aspects of it, but I'm feeling the same thing you guys are feeling, whether it's my team or another team. It could be a big moment or. For any team, I'm there and I'm tense, and the euphoria you kind of feel after the call, the release, this adrenaline that just leaves your body. That's happened maybe 10 times in my career, and that's one of the 10, and it's one of the coolest moments I've ever had the opportunity to be a part of. And again, we're a small part of it. If DeMar doesn't make that shot, it doesn't matter. He makes that moment, and we just try to compliment.
Did you think he was going to get the shot off? Were you sitting there wondering? Because does DeMar know how many ticks are left on the clock?
He clearly didn't, as he said afterwards. Like he didn't realize it. I thought he was going to get a shot off when he was bringing it up.
Right.
I didn't think it was going to come off one leg. With like
from
less than from 33 feet or whatever it ended up being, with less than a second left on the clock.
Yeah.
And I certainly didn't realize it was going down. But I mean, you prepare, you hold on, you stay ready so you can be ready, and that's how you approach it.
So one of the, I guess, most polarizing guys of the all season for the Bulls is Patrick Williams.
Sure.
A lot of Bulls fans are like, yes, he's the one, he's the next one, he's going to be great. Others are just skeptical on what he can take. What is your feeling on Patrick Williams as far as what you've seen up close?
It was really frustrating when you have all these good vibes off a 4-0 start. The Knicks are in town. It's a competitive game.
We were at that game.
You guys were at that game, and it's just so disappointing because when you hear the news the next day that this is going to be a while. He had worked so hard in that summer league going in. You're like, this guy's starting to take a step. He's figuring it out. So obviously it's more of a wash, most of that development of that year. Now, what we saw late in the year when he did come back, obviously the Minnesota game, and we take it with somewhat of a grain of salt because of the personnel that was on the floor. But what we saw in the playoffs, putting up 20, like these are developmental benchmarks. And Theo Epstein always talked about it when he was running the Cubs, that progress is never linear, and we want it to be so badly, right? The assumption is that every time you take a step, that's it. You're never going to backslide at any point. That's not true. That's not how human beings are. That's not how sports are. That's not how a high volume of this stuff interacts with the day-to-day process of a player. Like, you're going to take some steps back. So what I'm looking for is how big are the leaps? And the year 2 to year 3 leap is something that DeMar talked a lot about. And he was speaking about this specifically in terms of Patrick, where his second to third year in the league, he felt like he understood better what the travel's like, what your body goes through, how you can rest and recover better, along with the maniacal level of work you now have to put in because you've done this for so long and you've been so good compared to everybody else just about that you've played with. The last 2 years, you're not the best guy on the floor. You're not the third best guy. You may not be the seventh best guy on the floor anymore. You're in the NBA. Like, everybody's good. Everybody's here for a reason. So I think now if he can take that leap in understanding what it takes, and I think he's doing the right things. Going out to LA, doing the workouts 2 a days, waking up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning to go lift and to run drills and to take shots and to run some pickup with DeMar, to go play in the Drew League while DeMar's doing that, which, by the way, you want to talk about the maniacal level of work ethic, the maniacal level of love for the game. DeMar's playing in the Drew League playoffs right now. It is August. It is mid-August. Training camp is starting in like 3 weeks, and he's still going full bore.
And he's like, no, I'm going to need 17 fourth-quarter points to get
and he's
this
still
done.
scoring 37 and breaking guys down. So I think for Patrick to see that firsthand, this is what it takes to be at that guy's level. Like we said, we're putting him up with like Hall of Fame caliber active players like LeBron and Durant and Curry and Embiid and Jokic. Like, he was in the conversation for MVP. That's what it takes to get there. So I think seeing that is you got to see it to be it, and I think that helps. So okay, you've seen it now firsthand. You've experienced it a little bit. You've learned it. You've been told what it takes by that guy himself. How do you now apply that going into year number 3? And in a way, you're still technically looking at year number 2 for him because of the injury that took place.
He knows it's tangible, and that's important. Go ahead, Will.
Adam, I just want to know, like, we've talked about sort of the ups and downs of the season. What is your take on just the offseason in general, this idea of continuity and sort of sticking with the core, running it back? I've been a little bit skeptical, but we've also talked about like being rational and logical and emotional and all these things. But curious to hear your take on it.
If I look at the core, when they were healthy, when they were at their best, what did you guys think? Would you have taken them in a second round series against the right matchup? I cannot like
the hard right part matchup, to tell was right matchup because they had that glaring record that no one was ignoring against the top teams in the East.
So if I looked at the truly healthy group and looked at them and tried to extrapolate what I thought they could do, I would put them at a competitive second round team, which means you get you win your first round matchup because you're probably, let's say 4 or 5 even. You're probably good enough even as the 5 seed to beat the 4 seed in a series, even if you don't have home court. So I thought you should win a first-round series, and then with the right matchup, let's say you get the 2 or the 3 seed, you get the right matchup in that second-round series, you got a real shot to at least be competitive. I didn't say they necessarily win, but I thought they would make it a 6-game series. And maybe if a couple bounces go your way, you make some big shots. Maybe you do take it 7, maybe you do get to the conference finals somehow. That was my maybe pipe dream, highest level. I don't even want to call it a pipe dream. I thought that was the highest tangible graspable goal last year. So if that's the core that you're going with, and again, it's scary because you can't assume DeMar is going to do the exact same thing as a year ago, although now you see the work he puts in. If he did do it, you know why he does it, because he puts that work in. If Williams elevates to the level we expect, if Ball is healthy, and that's the biggest word, Will, here is health. Knock on whatever wood you can find right now, and it's
we do that a lot here.
I imagine you guys do. You have to have health. But that's the assumption for everybody, right? Every projection, every analysis you give is based on assuming that these guys are going to play 75 games or 70 games or whatever it is. So based off that, I agreed with the concept that you don't have to blow everything up. You don't have to mortgage a bunch of your pieces to go out and get a 34-year-old Kevin Durant and try to bring him over. You don't have to necessarily deal Kobe White right now if you don't want to. You don't have to make him. You don't have to shop Vucevic right now if that's not something you want to do. You can get better at the margins. I think that's a fair assessment for this team, and I think they at least got better around the margins. Is it like, would I love a Jordan Poole as my backup guard? Sure, of course I would. Like, would I want that as that type of player? Of course. Would I want, even like a Dwight Howard? Would I want Mitchell Robinson maybe to be like a lead center and maybe have Dwight Howard as a backup or something? Sure, that would be an ideal scenario. But what are you going to have to give up to get to that point? So I think the core pieces, the way they are more than good as long as they're healthy. And then Dalen Terry can help because he's not going to be expected to score double digits a game.
No, he's not.
Like Patrick Williams came in.
But he dropped 56 the other day, Adam.
56 in the Pro-Am in Crawford's league out there.
Yes, sir.
Like, you don't have to. Like, when Patrick Williams started playing, you're like, he's probably going to be a 10 to 12 point scorer. Yeah. And now you're looking and be like, I hope he's a 15 to 17 point scorer.
Yeah.
You're not expecting that from Dalen Terry.
No.
Give me help side defense in the second unit,
right.
guards and wings. Give me a steal if you can, and run the floor and go be an athlete in the open floor, something he was so good at Arizona. So that's what I need from him. Ayo going into year number 2, I expect him to make a standard improvement from year 1 to year 2, or at the very least keep a certain baseline.
Right.
And then let's see what happens when you get to February. All right, are they in position to make a trade to really boost you? Maybe you're the 4 seed and now you want to, try to make a real push. Yeah. Maybe you're the 7 seed and you need to make a move to try to solidify a top 6 position. And I don't think this is going to happen based on everything we've talked about. But let's say you're out of it. All right, well, now you really consider Vucevic, Kobe White. Maybe you consider somehow, I do not think it'll ever get to this point, but like teams have gotten to the point where they will deal their top guys because they know the contract situation is what it is. These guys aren't going to be in control, under our control for more than 2 more years. So let's make those moves. I don't think it's ever going to get to that point. I think you can wait and see right now because you got the backup center at the very least filled in Drummond. You got an insurance policy point guard and a veteran like Dragic. You brought in Terry, and then everybody else, if they're healthy, you've got a full roster of 10 guys that you feel comfortable putting out there.
Yeah,
true.
Bulls fans have been talking about it all offseason long. I see Corey, shout out to him for the super chat, asking about, packaging the Portland pick with Kobe White. Nothing like that ever happened this offseason or at last year's deadline. It hasn't happened yet. Maybe, like you said, we'll see what happens and where the team is coming up to this upcoming season's trade deadline.
That fits right into what Corey was talking about.
Right, exactly.
That fits right into your question, is you see where you're at that point.
Exactly. But I think in the meantime, something the Bulls fans should remind themselves of, and this is coming from someone who can lose his lid
quickly.
Literally and
literally
figuratively.
a moment ago, yes.
You literally just saw it.
Remember where we were. Dave, I think I saw you interacting on Twitter yesterday with somebody who you were showing appreciation to for remembering where we were.
Yeah.
It was the anniversary of the thanks goodbye of the bald-headed menace, as Dave calls him.
We don't say his name here.
what this new front office inherited just about 2 years ago, and what they built this past season, and what could have been had that what they built been healthy for the final stretch of last season.
Wasn't it August of 20 when Patrick Williams got drafted because the draft got pushed back? Yeah. So it's 2 years ago this month.
And they flipped an entire roster save for Zach and Kobe.
If you lined up those 2 rosters, you wouldn't recognize them. The staffs, the rosters, the front office, you wouldn't recognize them.
For them to say continuity and hopefully health, let's see where this goes. I know it's not the flashy thing.
It's
that
not
maybe
sexy,
some
and we obviously say we acknowledge that this is not splashy.
Right,
and we'll use the word continuity. That is a very unsplashy word to use, but it's an important one, and it's an applicable one to this particular group. And I'd much rather be in that state than be where this franchise was 2 years ago, where you're like looking around, going, we kind of have to blow this up.
I was looking for reasons to get out of bed 2 years ago.
Right now you have options at the very least as to what you can do. And again, it's nice to be able to react based on results rather than have to force the hand and hope that the results come with that.
Like, how good is it going to be that for a second year in a row you're going to watch actual good basketball?
That's the hope, man. Like, because I went through watching, obviously, as a fan my whole life, like watching a lot of, a decade of lean basketball, decade and a half of lean basketball until Rose came in.
Trash.
And then it was bad. It was bad hoops. And there were great individual players that will have great they've left a great mark on the franchise, and we appreciate them, but it didn't lead to what we talked about, setting the bar, right? The bar was set in the 90s, and it's hard to ever recreate that for any franchise in any sport. You are chasing ghosts in a lot of ways, but at the very least, you understand what it's like to be a winning franchise. And finally, we're seeing the elements of that again, just as we did 10 years ago, and we're getting a chance to see it again now.
So we're almost out of time, which is heartbreaking. But before we get out of here, We have been spending the last couple of weeks doing some sort of deep dives team by team in the East, especially the top end of the East, as far as what they've done in the offseason, who they've drafted, any trades they've made, free agent signings, to kind of look at, okay, is the power structure of the East going to look similar coming into this season compared to last season? For the most part, we've all kind of been on the consensus that, yeah, top of the East is going to stay the top of the East. Is there a clear team to you that should be the favorites to win it? Do you think Boston has the best odds at repeating as Eastern Conference champs? Or do you think there's a team that in the East that got considerably better, more so than all of the other top shelf teams in the East this offseason with their offseason moves?
I think Philadelphia stuck out when you go and try to get a little tougher. So you go get PJ Tucker. Like, that's a move that matters to me, especially a guy that has experience like that. And I think that's a big loss for Miami. Now, don't get me wrong. Miami is as good of an organization as there is in bringing new guys in. The way they implemented Max Strus and Martin and Gabe Vincent. Thank you. I was reaching for it. Like, those three guys made huge impacts, especially Strus and Vincent as like 3-point shooters. Like, and what they did and what Vincent did on the defensive end, having to guard some tough players. Like, they're as good as anybody at reloading, so you can't assume that they're not going to go out and try to improve on the margins. But PJ Tucker was a key part to what they were doing, especially in a playoff series. And I think him going over to Philadelphia changes a little bit of the tenor of that team. Harden took a pay cut, essentially, for him a pay cut, but like giving some salary relief to an organization that needs it. So maybe they do make a move and go out and bring in a Kevin Durant. And all of a sudden now the entire tenor of the conference shifts in favor of Philadelphia. They have Embiid, they have Durant, they've got Harden, they've got PJ Tucker, they've got a really good roster right behind them. We're not even mentioning Tobias Harris right now. Like, they're very good. They're very good overall. They're top 7 or 8 you'd put up with anybody in the NBA. So I don't think it's going to shift drastically. I still think Milwaukee with Middleton has a better run in the second round than they did. I still feel like they're going to be competitive again. That's the one thing where we looked at this Bulls team as like the number 1 team, for a good chunk of the year. And maybe some of it was a mirage because other teams were dealing with other stuff and Embiid missed a bunch of time. You could really deep dive and come up with 15 different answers, and that's okay. But what it doesn't change is that the rest of the conference is still really, really good. The Bulls still might only be the 4th or maybe 5th best team on paper compared to everybody else, because Milwaukee didn't get worse. I don't think Boston got worse. I think maybe Miami, quote unquote, got worse, but I expect them to fill in because they always do.
But they'll still be good because they never freaking go away.
They never go away. So like, it's not going to be easier this year. That's the other thing. You hope to counteract that by having your full complement to go up against these heavy rosters for the majority of the season, for all 4 meetings or all 3 meetings that you're going to see these teams.
Is there a game you're just looking forward to calling this season?
And well, I know the schedule is going to come out this week, so we'll really get to see it. But like, for me, it's always Milwaukee, especially after last year. Now that you've gotten a taste of seeing them in a playoff series and going, okay, so this is what the ramped up version of the Bucks looks like in a first round series. Golden State's going to be, I've heard inklings. I think Golden State's going to be a national broadcast. I think they're going to put Milwaukee and the Bulls on TNT this year. Like, I think you're going to see a little bit more national exposure this season. So a lot of those games, obviously we're not going to be calling some of those. We might call a couple of them, but like, I'm excited for the divisional games against Milwaukee. I'm very excited for a Bulls-Philadelphia matchup. And then anytime you go out and get barometer tests in the West, I'm always excited for Golden State, now Phoenix. The Bulls have played well against Dallas the last few years. I'm
got a good win against Denver last season.
Early in the season, the Denver. So like, just the barometer games, I think, are the ones that always stick out. Like, how do you match up with the teams that people look at and go, well, they're really good. Let's see how good you are in comparison to them.
Absolutely right.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time. Go ahead, Will.
I was just going to say, a couple of national games. Maybe we just got an atom bomb on the show.
I've just heard tricklings in, and we don't have a schedule yet, and we'll see. I'll see it with everybody else tomorrow. But from what I understand, there are going to be a few more exposed games for the Bulls to get an opportunity to play in front of the national
TNT Bulls are coming back.
Let's hope so. Let's get that TNT run going back. And again, what does it say? It means that you're a more impactful franchise now than you were a year ago.
Bulls always draw eyes globally and certainly across, for nationally televised. So they're a huge brand, and when they're decent, they should draw a lot of national games.
Absolutely.
But You always got Adam and his pal Stacey King on the local call for NBC Sports
Dude,
Chicago.
son.
Give it up. He's on the socials at Adam Amin. If you want to follow him, I know he's been saying he's been kind of, it's nice to take a step away from the socials every once in a while.
Step away. It's all good.
But he is there at Adam Amin on Twitter and on Insta if you want to give him a follow. Give the people what they want to hear. Week 1 NFL. Who you got?
Get excited for Motor City Dan Campbell and the kids in Detroit. We got Philadelphia at Detroit week 1, Seattle at San Francisco week 2. So I'll get the 49ers right after the Bears see them. And then week 3, we've got Philly again on the road at Washington in a divisional game. Carson Wentz rematch against his old team. So we're going to see Philly a couple times. I think there's a lot of hype surrounding the Eagles right now, and understandably so.
It's true.
I commend you for not just absolutely shitting on the Eagles and all of their terrible fans anytime you have to do an Eagles game.
That's your job, man.
It's very noble of you, sir.
Hey, man, we had like 4 of those games last year, and I was starting to develop like a Delco accent. It's like, go Birds. Let's get a hoagie.
Adam, thanks for coming to the studio, man. Always great to see you.
Always a pleasure to see you.
Adam Amin, the one, the only, ladies and gentlemen. For Adam, for Joey, for Will the Goat, for Big Dave, I'm Peck. We're back in studio with another show for you tomorrow. Tomorrow, make sure you tune in. We're doing a crossover with the ladies from CHGO Sky, previewing the Sky's playoff run as they try to defend their title. Sky playoffs start tomorrow night. We will have Sabria and Janice with us for a crossover show tomorrow, so tune in for that. Keep it locked right here on the CHGO Sports YouTube channel all day long for more of our content. Until tomorrow, for our crew here, for everybody, I'm Pack saying, see Red, be good. We love you, Bulls Nation. Peace out.